Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Age Gap Love Story. I'm Carrie,
I'm Alan.
and we are a married couple with a 32-and-a-half-year age difference. And we've been together for 27 years, I think, going on 28 years, I believe.
You wouldn't be able to tell that by looking at my youthful appearance.
So today we're going to be talking about why age gaps fail, and then we're going to give you our best tips to help you have a healthy relationship, because the research is pretty crazy on divorces in the United States. Okay, by age 55, 46% of Americans who've ever been married have been divorced at least once. So that's pretty crazy. That's almost 1 in 2. And I think it gets boiled down to, people say there's a 1 in 2 chance of getting a divorce. And then for second marriages, which often age gap couples, one partner has already been married and divorced often. And so then second marriages have an even higher rate of divorce. I didn't get that statistic, but so in some ways the odds are stacked against even just marriage in general, let alone an age gap relationship or an age gap marriage. And by the way, we just want to mention we have a bunch of resources. And the reason we started this channel is because there really wasn't anything else out there. And by the time we had started the channel, Alan and I had already been together. I think by that time we had been together like 21 years or something when we started the channel, because it's been over 5 years. But the bottom line is I had posted something on my Instagram and people seemed very, very interested in our relationship. And so then when I just kind of started to do some research, I saw that there were really no age gap resources. And so we started the channel to help fill the gap and also to help create a community around age gap couples and age gap relationships, just to share what we've learned and our experiences and to help give hope and support to other age gap couples. So we want to be clear that we do not think that age gap relationships are doomed to fail. I mean, quite the opposite. Alan and I have had a wonderful relationship. We continue to have a wonderful relationship. And
We are living proof.
yeah, we're living proof. But also, I think the thing is that having a large age difference is probably just going to be, it's almost like what you would call like a confounding factor. In other words, it adds kind of a dimension to
complication.
Yeah, that's a good word. It adds a complication. Not necessarily, like, I felt that our age gap was never a big deal between us, but then when it came to family, that was probably the biggest complication that we encountered, or just like outside of our relationship, the society, like work environment. Later, after Alan and I had been together, I went from a work environment, I went to graduate school, and that was like a little bit awkward because at the time I was I think I was 26 when I started grad school, and it was just awkward.
I went to one of Carrie's events on the campus, and her friends wanted to know if I was a professor.
Yeah, well, they weren't my friends at the time because that was like when I was just getting started. But somebody asked Alan, "Oh, are you a professor?"
Oh, yes, I
am. So yeah, and then later on when I did make friends, I remember I found this out later. I may have already told this story, but we went out to dinner with two other couples, and the two other couples were waiting for us and saw us approaching. And one of my friends said to my other friend, "Why did Carrie bring her dad?" I didn't find this out until literally like in the last year, and I thought it was hilarious. But at the time, being a 26-year-old, I was much more concerned about what my peers thought. It was just, it just made me uncomfortable. I'll be honest. And so many people know who watch our channel that I did not talk about my relationship with Alan, like to my parents, to my friends, to my close friends I did, but I basically like hid our relationship. Anyways, so we just want to try to help other people make it easier for you if you're in that situation. Just even knowing that there's a couple like us who's gone through it and we're still very much in love and happy together. Alan is 83 and I'm 50. So we've been together since I was 23. So almost half, more than half of my life I have spent with Alan at this point.
And
Okay.
she's still here. Can you believe it?
Yes. Okay, so I just wanted to share a little bit of statistics that I found. So, not surprisingly, there is not a lot of research on age gap couples. I don't know if you're in the psychology profession or you're a scientist, if that is a area like an undiscovered area that you'd like to study. But I think it would be great if there was more research, because research usually helps, come to more scientific conclusions. But so one study I found, it said that couples with age differences of 10 or more years had significantly higher risks of union dissolution compared to similar age couples. So that sounds like it's not necessarily marriage, but just like an age gap relationship. But I could totally see that, because especially in the beginning of the age gap relationship, I find, at least for us, was for sure, and many of the couples in our Facebook group, for sure, like the beginning first few years are going to be the hardest.
I think that's true of any marriage, because there's
Yeah, good
an
point.
adjustment, an alignment of values, attitudes, integration into the families.
Right. And you're just getting to know each other and making sure that you're going to be compatible.
Right. And again, that's a complication. It becomes more complicated when there is an age gap situation.
Right. And then I already mentioned the divorce rate in the United States. Oh, and then the only other statistic it said is marrying very young, under 20, is one of the strongest predictors of divorce, regardless of age gap. So that
It doesn't apply to me.
makes a lot of sense too. So let's talk about, we came up with 5 main reasons why age gap relationships fail. And then we also came up with 5 ways to help prevent that from happening. Because we don't want to just make it sound like doom and gloom, because obviously we don't believe that's the case. So let's talk about 5 reasons why age gap relationships may struggle. And I think I've also mentioned this in a previous episode as well, but fairly early on, when Alan and I were still dating, I remember I saw a therapist, and it was after I had told my mom, who was very upset. I felt like I needed some more support. So I did see I think she was a marriage and family therapist, and she had mentioned this issue of life stage mismatch, I guess, in other words. At the time, I thought maybe she meant it more like, I was in my 20s, I was just starting my career. Alan was in his 50s. He wasn't ending his career because he didn't end up retiring until
77.
Yeah. So, but it was more like she probably meant over the lifetime of our relationship, I guess. And I could definitely see that that could be an issue. If you think about it, life stages would be like career, maybe if you want a family, retirement is a life stage.
Health? Or is that a separate topic?
No, that's probably different. But retirement, I think, but more like retirement, maybe slowing down would be, you could consider a life stage. Although I don't think that you have to slow down in retirement.
It's like the old expression, when the husband retires, you have twice as much husband and half as much money.
Well, that's not true anymore, because a lot of women, or the, we have many, many two earning households.
Oh.
So
Okay.
I guess it'll be half as much money, or maybe it's only a fourth as much money. Anyways,
Maybe.
okay. fertility and family planning challenges, that could definitely be a challenge with different ages. But I think this idea of life stages and not necessarily being aligned, it can be an issue with age gap relationships. I think fortunately for Alan and me, I've always been able to work from home, and that's made a huge difference, because I could see that as Alan was kind of transitioning into retirement, if I had been still really gung ho going to an office, traveling potentially, that that could have been an issue.
I would have missed Carrie.
Yeah, and especially if he had retired more of a traditional retirement age.
I'd be home all alone.
Yeah. So that is something to think about, but we have made it work, and I definitely made conscious decisions, um, to
Career-wise.
career-wise to be more at home, which actually matched my personality better too. And then it turns out I ended up having a lot of health challenges through my adulthood, and so it's just worked out a lot better for me to work from home, so make my own schedule, not have too many outside pressures on my time. So, I mean, I'm definitely like a workaholic, so I put a lot of pressure on myself. But when I really need to, I can take a break. And, we can travel when we want to and all those types of things. So it is definitely something to think about depending on what types of careers or interests you two have and the
Yeah.
retirement issue.
Yeah, your schedules and goals and interests have to align. If not, it's going to be a huge point of friction, as we have just covered. So that's something to think about.
Yeah. But again, it's not an immediate no or an immediate problem. It just really depends. Okay, so the next one that we see the most, this is probably should have been number one.
The most.
The most.
The
Like,
most.
and I would say that I'm not a scientist per se, and so, but in our Facebook group, I feel like I have really good access to other age gap couples, and of course, I see everything that everyone posts. And 90% of the time, when there is an issue with age gap couples, it is because of a family member. Family member, the younger partner's mother or father doesn't approve, even sometimes like a sibling.
Children.
Oh, right. Children from a previous relationship. So that's probably the two main, the parent or parents of the younger partner, and then children of the older partner.
I will relate a brief story. A fellow I knew professionally, highly educated, extremely successful, divorced, had two adult children, both of them in very prominent universities, expensive, prominent universities. And he knew that Carrie and I had a relationship. We were married and our age gap. So he made a point to go out of his way to arrange to meet me in our area for lunch. And he said the reason for it was that he had met a young lady, quite a bit younger, and since his divorce, it's the only woman that he'd met that really made him happy. And he said that the sticking point was, although they were really happy together, that his two children were very upset about it and gave him a lot of pushback. This is while they're attending expensive universities. And he said, what do you think? He said, should I pursue this relationship? And I said, well, of course, that's entirely up to you. But I said, does this woman make you happy? He said, yes. I said, can you see yourself spending the rest of your life with her and being happy? He said, yes. And I said, how often do you see your kids? He said, I hardly see them at all. They're always busy. I said, well, I would go with what makes you happy. And I said, I would think that your children come around. I said, if they don't, stop paying their tuition at the universities. Uh, and he kind of gave me a funny look. I don't know that he would do that, but I guess it rang a bell with him. Here the kids were dependent upon him, for their support. and they were telling him what to do. I said, you're an adult. I said, you're a bright guy. I said, if you like this woman, I said, you've been married once, you've been around the block, and you know what you like and what you want in life. And I said, happiness is a hard thing to get your hands around. So if you've got it here, I would go for it and work with your kids, hope that they come around. And if they don't, well, you just have to deal with that and go with what makes you happy.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting to me that parents are, I've heard a few of these stories as well, that parents are almost afraid of their kids. Maybe because it's in a divorce situation, they're afraid of being like, they already maybe feel guilty or isolated from their children, and then they're afraid of like really upsetting them and then maybe becoming, estranged from them. But I feel like this is a boundary issue, and I know it's harder when talking about dealing with your parents. I do feel like you still also, have a right as an adult to set a boundary with your parents. But on the other hand, like as a parent setting a boundary with an adult child and saying, I love you, but I have a right to make my own relationship decisions. I mean, to me, that's kind of like 101, like parenting 101, that you, or being an adult 101, to set a boundary like
Right.
that.
And for a lot of reasons, it depends upon your relationship with your parents, either your mother or father or both, and how involved they are in your life. I remember a long time ago, I was having some ups and downs with my parents on different things. And my older brother at the time, he was 7 years older, he said, look, he said, whenever they tell you to do this, to do that, he said, yes, you're right. That's fine. Okay. And then he said, do what you want.
Yeah.
Because they don't have an oversight on every aspect of your life. They're not looking over your shoulder. So unless it's obvious to them, do what you think is best for you and continue to tell them, yes, you're right. I appreciate your advice and thank you. And then you go about your merry way.
Yeah. I think the challenges come when it's situations like holidays, and now we're recording this in early fall, and with the holidays coming up, that can be a really isolating time for people in age gap relationships. If either you're hiding the relationship, and then you're going to have to be away from your partner for the holidays. And Alan and I went through that too early on. I didn't want, I mean, there was no way was going to bring him home for Christmas. And I remember one of my mom's friends was like, "Oh, you didn't bring your boyfriend?" And I remember saying, "Oh, I don't have a boyfriend," even though I did. I mean, we'd been together like 2 or 3 years. And it was just awkward and
The
uncomfortable.
thing is, holidays are an emotionally charged
Yeah,
time
yeah,
anyway, for most people, almost
yeah.
everybody's lives. So they're already a delicate time. And my personal feeling, the holidays were different for me when I was growing up because my parents always were working. They had a store, a business, and the holidays were a busy time in the store. So we didn't really celebrate the holidays like a traditional family. So I
Mm,
feel differently about it. But my thought, my advice would be make your own environment, make your own holidays. Like in our circumstance, my two daughters uh, are very respectful of their mother, which they should be, my first wife. And one of them will have her over for Thanksgiving, and the other will have her over for Christmas. And on both of those holidays, Carrie and I, we do what we want. We celebrate the holidays together. And initially, I think it was a little difficult because Carrie was more used to a family holiday than I was. But we kind of got over it, and we have our time together, and it's fine.
yeah. And also, there's so much legitimacy to creating your own family with friends. And in a way that's easier. You can pick your own family by your friends, and maybe they don't even have to be super close friends. But I guarantee you, if you look around your community, there will be people who are going to be alone for the holidays. And you just, if you like entertaining, invite your neighbor whose kids live across the country and can't visit, or invite your friend who you don't really know that well but you think is going to be alone, and then all of a sudden you end up having a really fun, hopefully, and non-triggering event. And it's just one day usually, and then it's over. And it ends up being actually less stress. It's usually less
Yeah.
triggering, less emotionally charged if you can spend time with friends instead of family.
Yeah, we know the old expression, you can pick your friends, you can't
Yeah.
pick your family.
Yeah, and so you can pick your friends who can end up feeling like family in a good way. So it's really up to you. That was a little side note on the holidays because they are coming up. We just want you to know that if you are feeling this family disapproval situation, I do think, well, we'll get into some of our tips, but I feel like as I've gotten older, it's gotten so much easier for me to set, what I call healthy boundaries. And if somebody's like, if I look back on my younger self, like in that situation where, my mom's friend was like, oh, you didn't bring your boyfriend, she was trying to get me to, I don't know, talk about Alan or maybe reveal what was going on, I just may have said like, I don't want to talk about that.
Now, in all fairness to parents, being a parent myself,
Yeah.
you have to appreciate that in most cases, your parents give you advice wanting the best outcome for you. So it's easy to understand with an age gap relationship that they're going to be concerned that the older of the two is going to take advantage of the younger of the couple. And your parents, particularly if the child is a daughter, they're going to be very protective and concerned that she's going to be victimized or taken advantage of by this older person. And so it's obvious that they should be naturally concerned. The bottom line is, though, you have to figure out a way to gain their confidence as the older party, convince them that you're interested only in a sincere and loving relationship, and you don't plan to make it a quick, just fast take advantage of the younger partner situation. So again, you have to have some empathy for why the parents think the way they do, and try to work around it.
Yeah. I mean, for the most part, I think a parent is going to be skeptical of anybody that they're going to bring home in a way. I mean, and depending on the culture, I mean, different cultures have, varying levels of strictness about who their children are allowed to date, or when they're allowed to date, and all that kinds of things. So I think it really just depends on everyone's individual situation. But at least, you're in the United States. Somebody's considered an adult generally. I think in most states at the age of 18. I think some states is different.
For me, it was 65.
And so, at the age when you're an adult in the United States, you have, you have basically have all your rights. I guess 21 is, um, you have different
I
rights,
think they
but
call it the age of consent.
okay. Well, anyways, and so it's really a matter of setting boundaries and whether it's where you're going to go that evening or what you're going to buy at the store or who you're going to date. It's, if you are set in your convictions about what you want, then you have to communicate that to your parents. And there's ways of communicating that are better than others. I mean, throwing a tantrum, having a big fight
Right now,
is not the way to do it, but having good communication. And we've done some specific podcast episodes, and that maybe that is one that we need to revisit because we do get a lot of questions about that. Like, oh, how do I talk to my parents, or how do I tell my mom or my dad? So that might be something that we should revisit because it is something that comes up a lot. But these are things that you can look up to and like, um, how to communicate in a difficult situation. There's something called nonviolent communication style, which has to do with kind of like diffusing the situation and setting an intention about what you're going to talk about. So if you want more on that, let us know. Otherwise, I think we should move on to the third one.
just one final point,
Okay.
that there are unusual circumstances. For example, if you are living at home or if your parents are
Yeah.
supporting
Yeah.
you financially, obviously they're going to have a lot more influence over your life than if you're on your own, supporting yourself and living independently.
Right.
Final thought.
Okay. So I think a third issue that age gap relationships may suffer or struggle or even fail is because of this social stigma. And I see it all the time. I see it in movies, I see it on social media, I hear it in podcasts, and it's the way people talk about age gap relationships. Usually it's referring to an older man, younger woman, and they'll just like make a statement like, oh, it was that older man, younger woman situation, or I don't know.
Like a trophy bride.
Yeah, or just stuff like that. Social stigma. I think if you're going to be in an age gap relationship, especially long term, you kind of have to appreciate that you're going to come up against this. And if you're the type of person who doesn't like to rock the boat and you don't like anybody giving you the side eye, well, then this is going to be tough for you. But if you're somebody who maybe, or you can kind of grow into the type of person who doesn't really care about what other people think about you, then it's going to be easier for you. And when I say you don't care about what other people think about you, I think at a certain point, like I realized you're never going to make everyone happy. There is somebody will always, like, you could be the nicest, most beautiful, kindest person, and somebody will have something bad to say. So, if you're in an age gap relationship, I guarantee you somebody is going to have something to say about it.
There was a singer in the 1960s, Ricky Nelson, and there's a line in one of his always liked. And that line was, you can't please everybody, so you might as well please yourself. And you are the captain of your own destiny. You have control, in most cases, of your life. And you have to remember that. You have to empower yourself and move forward.
I think one potential issue could be this issue of a power dynamics, where if you feel like, I guess, just taking it from the younger person's perspective, because that was my perspective or is my perspective, if you feel like there's an imbalance of power where like you don't get to ever make any of the decisions in the relationship, then that can be a problem. So that's maybe something to be aware of.
Carrie's the boss. She not only wears the pants, she wears the shirt, the socks, and the shoes.
um, well,
Well,
I'm just saying that maybe when we first started dating,
I was the boss.
maybe
I got demoted.
Maybe.
Now I work for her.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it could be an issue, especially when you're dating. If you don't feel like you have a say in how I don't know, kind of the terms of the relationship, or if every time you have an argument, you feel like you can't get a word in edgewise, or you, I don't know, you just like you don't have a lot of decision making. Like, essentially in a relationship, ideally, overall, it would be like a 50-50 thing. I mean, it's a relationship, it's not a dictatorship. So it's important that you have discussion about important things, where you're going to live. I don't know.
And these things should be discussed before you become a couple, before you get married, whatever the
Or
term
yeah,
you want
along
to
the
use.
way.
Yeah, these are things you need to iron out so that when you do kind of tie the knot, so to speak, when you move in together or get married or both, whatever, that there's an understanding about who can do what.
Right. And I think you get a sense of that pretty early on. I mean, if one person is always choosing which movie to see, or always setting the schedule, or always choosing the restaurant, and you don't feel like, say, hey, I want to try, or I really like this restaurant. And then, you always get shot down, then that can be um, I guess, a picture or a clue that maybe there is a power imbalance. And I think this can also happen in any kind of relationship. It doesn't have to be age gap.
Yeah, and speaking of any relationship, whether it's age gap or whatever, I see so many cases of women that hook up with a loser.
Oh,
A guy who's not working, can't keep a job, drinks too much, doesn't leave the house, can't pay the bills. You think to yourself, why did they even hook up with this guy in the first place? Well, I think the only answer is physical attraction, maybe, sex. But there's an old expression, kiss and don't last, cook and do. Yeah, I think that's an old Southern expression. So, after you get past the romance, somebody's got to cook the meals, take care of the house, look after the kids, whatever the case may be. So you have to think about that and get beyond the kissing part.
okay. Uh, Speaking of which, the last one is generational differences, which can be an issue. It definitely can be an issue. I think in our case, maybe, I'm not sure, maybe it's because we've been together for so long, but I feel like our generational differences have almost become like it's actually made our relationship stronger because we have kind of diverse. It's like we both grew up in the United States, so we have that in common. And then I remember a lot of the things like from the 70s and 80s, and then the things, and because my parents were like taught me a lot of stuff from like the 50s and 60s, so I was like aware of the music of that generation, and I don't know, some of the politics. We watch a lot of movies like from the 60s and stuff, and so then I get a better sense of what it was like and kind of the politics.
Even from the 1930s. As I got to know Carrie
Yeah.
better.
And Alan is not was not born in the 30s, by
No, I was
the
born in
way.
1942.
Yeah.
But as I got to know Carrie better, I love old movies, old TV shows and stuff. And as I got to know her better, I began to introduce her to stuff. And I can remember I was telling her about the first old movie I wanted to watch. And she said, "It's in black and white? I don't want to watch a black and white movie." Well, now that's changed. And a lot of the old movies in black and white, Carrie really likes, especially comedies and things of that sort. So I've introduced her to a lot of stuff that otherwise she wouldn't have been exposed to. And she's introduced me to a lot of things that I would never have adapted to as easily, a lot of technology and different things.
Yeah. And I think it's great. Alan is very open-minded, and he's also like what I would call like a sport. Like if I say, "Do you want to watch this movie or do you want to?" I don't even have a good example, but he's very willing to try new things, and so I think just his personality, just our personalities have worked really well to be in an age gap situation. So hopefully that's the case with you too. And
Yeah, you don't want to hook up with an old fart, like the old dog that won't learn new tricks. That's going to be a painful environment for the younger person.
yeah, and I would say there's, like you have to be appreciative of the fact that, um, like Alan in his to a certain extent is like set in his ways. But on the other hand, he's also very flexible. And if I'm interested in something, he's open minded.
Well, as you age, you begin to like what you like, and you have preferences that become stronger and stronger, the way you want to do things, the way you want your environment, and whatever. But fortunately, that hasn't gotten in the way of our daily life. And a lot of those things Carrie has adapted to. When I say those things, I mean the way I prefer things.
Yeah.
And I've adapted to the way she likes things to a large degree. So there's a lot of give and take, and that would be the case in any relationship.
Yeah, and I think you also have to keep in mind, what depending on like how old you are now when you're watching this, like if you're 25 and he's 45 or 55, well, when he's 75, you're not going to be 25 anymore. Then you're going to be 45 or whatever. So like when we started dating, like I said, I was 23, he was 55, 56. Now he's 83, but I'm 50, so
She's
it's not like I'm a
she,
young
she,
pup
she's
anymore.
catching up.
So like I'm gonna need reading glasses here pretty soon, and I'm getting stuff from the AARP. So anyways, so you can keep that in mind, so you don't have to, I guess, worry so much. Like you don't have to Like, I mean, I used to think like, oh, when Alan's, 85, I'll be 53. And I thought, well, yeah, he'll be really old, but dang, I'm going to be old too.
Yeah, another factor along those lines, just sort of an overriding thought here, is that when you do hook up with an older person, one thing to be very aware of and sensitive to is, do they take care of themselves?
Yeah.
If you hook up with an older guy who's overweight, who smokes, drinks, doesn't eat well, doesn't exercise, that guy is going to be an albatross around your neck. That's going to be a lot of problems. And, no matter how much you
Jeez.
like that person, how sweet they may be, it's going to be hell for you when they get older and you have to take care of them. And that'll happen sooner because they're not in good health. So, I mean, I'm very serious about that. That's a really important element in the relationship with an older person. They may have a lot of qualities, but if they end up drooling on their shoes, in 10 years, who's going to have to take care of them? You. So, and if they're not in good shape, you try to whip them into good shape. You have to eat better. You have to exercise. Stop drinking so much, or whatever. Stop
Well, that's not
smoking.
really the job of a partner.
It isn't.
Yeah.
But if they don't listen to advice for their own well-being, just get rid of them. Bang.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's going to kill you. Kill
Well,
both of you.
that's, I guess, one way to look at it. Okay, so let's talk about.
I'm trying to be realistic.
Okay, well, you sound like something like what a parent would say to somebody who's in an age gap.
Well,
but I mean, I guess it is something to think
important.
about. I guess I hadn't really thought about that, because when I met Alan, we were both interested in staying fit and not so much eating well, because we've both kind of gone on this health journey together. We both, once we started dating, we started eating out a lot, and we were in love, so we were having desserts and we were la la la, and we both gained weight. So then and that's when I started having like symptoms, which later turned out to be like autoimmune symptoms. So I started studying nutrition, and now that's kind of my whole interest in my career. And
but
so
we both exercised.
yeah, that's right. We, from the get-go, we've always exercised. I mean, it can be harder as you get older, but we've adapted, and Alan has really, he's very committed to his exercise routine. So I mean, I guess if you're both not interested in health and exercise, then it is something to think about. The fact that the older partner is probably going to be confronted with some realities sooner than the younger partner. So it'd probably behoove both of you to try to take care of yourselves better.
Take care of each
together.
other.
Yeah, and do it together. It can, I mean, we go for a long walk every day, and it's a great time to talk about what's going on in the world, just what our plans are for the day or the week.
We exercise in the morning together usually.
Yeah. Anyways, okay, so let's talk about a few other kind of like solutions. This is a long episode.
Yeah, maybe we should shorten it up a bit.
Okay. So I think communication is huge. That takes time usually, but you have to be able to talk about things like finances and like hard subjects, retirement, caregiving, planning for these things, that maybe if you were in a relationship with somebody your age, you wouldn't be thinking about them maybe so early on in your relationship. They are things that you need to be upfront about. And if you can't talk about those things, then maybe you can start small and start with like little small conversations about these things. But it is really important to talk about these things early on.
Yeah, especially how the older person is going to be able to support the two of you in retirement.
Yeah.
That's a big issue.
Well, it's not necessarily, or how you're going to handle retirement. It's not necessarily the older person's responsibility, but how you're both going to handle retirement, or
Well, considering that the older person will retire earlier, they need to be prepared.
Okay, well, maybe to take care of themselves and then the younger person has their own retirement plan.
Hopefully.
Okay. Anyways, whatever, everybody's going to be different, but it's just something to talk about and plan for. Alan's big on planning.
Our family motto is be prepared for everything.
Good job. Okay, I think having shared values, no matter what your age difference is, just in any type of relationship, if you have shared values, if you both value, security, health, whatever it is between the two of you.
If you're organized, does the husband or the wife leave the toothpaste tube oozing on the sink and the other partner goes in and goes, ah, you made a mess in the bathroom. So issues like that can really be serious issues in a marriage.
And we also don't think that husband and wife, we don't believe in just traditional families. We believe in mixed partners. Yeah. Anyways, we just want to put that out there. Balance of power, that everybody in the relationship has a say and in voice is valued. I think that's important. Not just the older partner, but everybody's voice is heard. And then as far as like addressing stigma from the society, this is where Alan and I agree that it's like, do your very best to just ignore it. You focus on your relationship. You focus on your supportive community, people who care about you and who also believe in your relationship, who maybe other age gap couples. Just focus on the positive and really try to put the negative out of your mind. And to be honest, this is why we haven't been doing as much on social media, because as much as I love interacting with other age gap couples and many followers of this of our YouTube channel, like the BS comments that I get, I don't have time for that. I don't have energy for that, and I just rather not even deal with it. So when we do these longer form videos, like the people who really want to hear what we have to say and who it's going to benefit you, hopefully, you're not going to leave a nasty comment. But on a short Instagram video, it's just so easy for people to be mean. And I'm just like, I don't have time for that. And then future planning, preparing for your, health changes, for aging realistically. So you're not surprised and you both are kind of on board with what is going to happen in the future. I think it just gives a lot of comfort, and it helps build trust. Okay, so that's it. So while age gap couples may have some added complications, we definitely don't think it's that it has to sabotage your relationship. We definitely don't think that. We've seen many happy age gap couples, including ourselves, and we hope that you have a successful age gap relationship with lots of love, respect, shared goals. If you have any special topics you'd like us to address, please leave them in the comments. Otherwise, we'll see you in the next video. Take care, everyone.
Bye, y'all.